Hey everyone, so I know a lot of you guys have been asking for my opinions on the damage meta, the build meta going into tomorrow's day 1 dungeon race, and so, fret not. In my opinion, the damage and build meta haven't really shifted that much since last season. That being said, a lot of new stuff has come out pretty recently. There's new artifact mods, stuff like that, so people want my thoughts on these things. I tested everything last night, got all my testing done, way more efficient compared to the final shape launch, so I'm kind of proud of that. I'm going to present all my results today, but this video is mostly going to be focused on damage. And the reason for that is because I think the build meta realistically hasn't shifted that much compared to, let's say, something like the final shape. I think everyone has a good understanding of what to use in a day 1 situation for the most part now. Hunters, prismatic, not surprising. You could take like Hoyle Arachne, you could do like grapple melees, you could do kind of whatever. Titan, Syntho Consecration, but the super you use may be something that you don't expect, right? I think Twilight Arsenal got gutted a lot, and no spoilers here, but Thundercrash got a very large, disproportionately sized buff, which we'll talk about here. Supers are part of the damage testing today. And then Warlock, obviously you're probably playing prismatic or solar, right? No surprises there. I don't think that, build meta has really shifted that much. Now the damage meta, on the other hand, we're going to talk about that today. That's going to be the focus of this video. I tested everything Bungie said they changed, as well as some stuff that Bungie didn't say they changed, but people said I should test because they were interested, right? So Prospector, Peacekeeper SMGs, all that sort of stuff. We're going to talk about it in this video. So first things first, let's go ahead and look at my summary page here, which I've written to kind of guide my discussion during this video. Small thing, right? Get some housekeeping out of the way. All bosses and all damage numbers from your weapons, abilities, whatever, have increased by about 0.5% because of the raid and dungeon scalar changes going into the season. This doesn't really affect anyone or anything besides me. Kind of pisses me off because I had to multiply everything in my spreadsheet by like 1.005. But there's something you should know in case you're confused by why your weapons are doing slightly different damage than last season. That's why that's happening. Okay, so let's start with weapons, right? So we have regular weapons, and then we have a whole section for lucky fans. So we'll talk about weapons first. Alethonym. Now Alethonym, let me go ahead and pull up my video of Alethonym. So Alethonym, right, it has a kind of like these stacking damage over time ticks. They're very infrequent compared to something like Witherhoard, so don't think of it as a weapon like that. But if you impale a target over and over and over again, specifically like a powerful target like, a Templar or another boss, it does kind of like this more damage over time, like the DOT effect stacks as you, shoot more and more shots. So the damage is actually not that bad, right? And the per shot damage on average is actually higher than something like a Mountaintop, which is pretty decent, ignoring the fact that this thing is, even with Lunafactions and 3 loaders, which is what I was having on here, and I used RDM in this clip actually, the damage is not that great, right? It's not that great. It looks to be around Hierarchy and 0 stack Outbreak during its first rewind cycle, which is not that great. I mean, if we go ahead and look for Alethonym here, you'll see Lunafaction Boots 3x Loader. It's something like 73,000 damage, 73,000 DPS, which is just okay. It's just okay, nothing to write home about. Obviously, I think it's a little better than I expected it would be, but my expectations were quite low. So I'm not going to say this thing is like meta-defining or anything. It might be disabled for the dungeon race because it is capable of producing like infinite ammo off of, immune targets. So theoretically, in between phases, if a boss is like immune, you could have someone on your team just like shooting the boss constantly while he's immune and just like making ammo off of him. I don't know if that's a productive use of your time, but it is a thing you can do. So I suppose it's technically, I don't know, probably an exploit that will probably be patched out or disabled for day 1. Not that I think this weapon is going to be insane on day 1 anyways, but just something you should know, I suppose. Okay, next up we have Choir of One. Now, Choir of One, a lot of you guys were asked me to test it because it got nerfed. Now, just a reminder, there are 2 ways to use Choir of One for DPS, right, outside of the hit scan mode. You can either use it point blank, which is what a lot of people were doing when the weapon first came out. They were like, holy crap, this guy does so much damage when you point blank it. You see basically just these 2 damage numbers per burst. Or you can space yourself so that you shoot it and you want it to hit the boss right after that kind of point blank burst begins to split. So you start to see all these cluster damage numbers like so. This is around the perfect distance. You see all those splash numbers? So this is the spacing that I'm talking about. Now, remember when we tested last season and I told everyone that spacing yourself out like this does slightly more damage than just being point blank, and it also chunks the health bar a bit more, so it does significantly more damage in that regard. Well, I tested both modes, and if you space yourself out like this, it's like a 12% damage nerf that they gave it, and if you don't, you go point blank, it's like 15% nerf. So what does that mean overall? Well, remember how I said this weapon is basically Acreus level of damage, but in a special ammo auto rifle? Well, it's not obviously that good anymore, right? It's like an overall 13% DPS nerf, which is around 1k damage instead of Darcy damage, right? It was around Darcy before. So it's still pretty good for like essentially like an auto rifle. It's pretty good. Now the big thing here is it got a 34% total damage nerf if you choose to use it in this point blank mode. So it still has fairly decent total damage, but you kind of do need to use 3 reserves to reach anywhere near like the previous number. It's only an 11.5% nerf for the hit scan mode because you don't have this damage nerf that's built in, but 34% is a lot, right? I think a little bit too much to be honest, but it, you know, such is the result of nerfing reserves and also damage at the same time. I think it was a fair nerf, and I think the weapon is still honestly usable given how easy it is to use. It's really ammo efficient for ad clear. It one-shots red bars all the time, even in hard content, as long as you hit a crit. So I don't know, this weapon, I'm kind of on the fence on it. Should you take it into day one? Maybe, but it's definitely a lot more ammo sensitive than it used to be. You definitely need to like make finishers or something like that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Choir of 1. Let's move on to heavy jails. So heavy jails, spike grenades are now 3% better than base. I think this is a wider gap than it used to be. Bungie changed the ammo distribution between impact and explosive damage for heavy jails. So people were saying because there's more impact, spikes are going to be better. They're only 3% better than base, right? I think it's bigger than before. I think it's like 1% or something before, but yeah, it's pretty small. But yeah, I obviously go for spike grenades, right? Yeah. Rapids got, Bungie said I think they got a 7% buff. In my testing, it was like 7.5%, which is like basically the same thing, right? So, you know, good enough. So now for your information, rapid fire heavy jails have a 10.3% advantage against adaptives. So, you know, here's a clip of me testing Cuirass. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, they now have higher DPS and total damage compared to adaptive heavy jails. All we're missing now is a good rapid fire GL. Spoiler alert, I believe there's a rapid fire heavy GL coming from the dungeon, or sorry, at least a drum heavy GL coming from the dungeon. So hopefully it's a rapid and hopefully it has great perks. If so, I mean, Bungie usually tends to give us one really broken weapon from dungeons when they come out, you know. So I really hope, you know, this is like the Storm Chaser of 2024 Destiny. So, you know, hopefully we'll see how that goes, but hopefully it's a good rapid fire because we have a lot of good adaptives, right? Wicked Sister, Cataphragt, Edge Transit, etc., etc. So hopefully we get a rapid fire that has like Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch or like, I don't know, Chaos Reshaped or something. That'd be cool. High Impact LMGs got a 4.4% buff, which is around what Bungie said they were, so totally fine, you know, chill. I don't really need to show you that. I mean, that's kind of whatever. Not for boss damage, right? Diris got approximately a 15% buff on average per shot. This is including the moths that are generated. There is a moth internal cooldown, so this is on average assuming you are rapidly firing the weapon. So here's what I did to kind of test that. I got myself to 1 HP to activate the frenzied mode of Diris, just like this, and then I just spammed left click on the boss. Boom, 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 and you can see here the moths are kind of exploding, but there is a cooldown. It's not just every 2 shots, it's like every, I don't know, like 4 or 5 shots because of the cooldown, right? So what does this mean in terms of damage? Diris damage was pretty pathetic before. Let's see where it sits now. Diris corrupted nucleosynthesis, 121,638. That's okay, it's not bad, right? It's like a similar DPS to like a rewind 4 times supremacy, which is no damage perk, but it's like basically just shooting a rapid fire sniper rapidly over and over. And yeah, but the total damage is still not there, right? So it's just kind of it's kind of whatever. I think the reserves also got changed on Diris, so I might need to change this, but still, the total damage for being an exotic special is not great. I do not recommend using this thing for boss damage, but for, I don't know, for ad clear, for people who are using this with like moth keepers, they're probably happy about this, right? It probably feels pretty good. But besides that, I don't think this is like a phenomenal gun for boss damage, even for augmenting like a damage rotation or something like that. I think the swap damage numbers on this thing are still not high enough in my opinion, so yeah, it's just all right. It's cool, it's fine. Maybe I'll see some use with Envious Arsenal Tomorrow's Answer when I make a damage rotation with something like that, but for now I don't think it's too crazy. So yeah, that's Diris. Let's keep going. Prospector, big one, right? Everybody's been asking me about Prospector. So Prospector, it now has a 6 mag instead of an 8 mag, I believe, and it has about a 39% buff per shot. Okay, so previously it was doing 40% less. Well, depending on how you do proportional math, but whatever. This puts it at similar DPS to Legend of Acreus with 32% less total damage. So let's go ahead and go to Prospector here, right? And for those of you that are wondering, yes, the clustered explosives, I was not able to test it on Templar because, you know, he has a rather triangular hitbox, so a lot of the clusters were not doing damage to him. So what did I do instead? I did what some people were asking me to do, and I tested on Riven. So on Riven, I tried testing like underneath her neck. It wasn't great. A lot of the clusters were like hitting the ground underneath her, not doing full damage. So what do? Toes, baby. In between the toes. Bang, 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 bang. So I think most people would say this is basically like an optimal case for Prospector. You have an entire boss's hitbox surrounding the explosion, right? So all the clusters are hitting. Look at all those beautiful damage numbers. So this is like the optimal situation. So assume that in practice, Prospector will probably do less damage, right? The clusters I don't think are like a huge component of the damage, but just assume it'll do less damage than Legend of Acrius, and assume that, like, you know, this is also with Radiant Dance Machines, so keep that in mind as well. If you're not using Radiant Dance Machines, you're manually reloading this thing, it's way slower, so assume the damage will probably drop to somewhere like Levy or something like that, right? So you can think of this thing as basically, yeah, it's like Acrius DPS if you use it perfectly. If you don't use it perfectly, it's probably similar to Levy, right? It does similar total damage, probably does similar DPS. So that's something to keep in mind. We're going to talk about Levy changes as well, but yeah. So in general, what do I think about Prospector? Apparently Prospector does not trigger the like weaken clear effect, from what I've been told. I could be wrong on that, but from what I've been told. But even if it did, in my opinion, this is not worth using on day one, right? It is super brain dead easy damage, don't get me wrong. But number one, the need for a reload assist cuts its DPS by a lot. Number two, it's not compatible fully with all boss models because that cluster effect. And number three, the total damage is just not there, right? On day one, what you're prioritizing is ammo efficiency, total damage, and versatility. You want to be able to use your heavy weapon on maybe ads or like ad clear. So, you know, stuff like Whisper kind of suffers in that department. But it's, you know, it's the total damage is not there. 4.4 is not that great. It's not even significantly higher than legendary heavy jails, which have higher, if not similar DPS values. So I'm going to say Prospector, I'm not going to really give it my, you know, seal of approval. There's other weapons that I'm going to suggest later on down the line, notably like Whisper, Parasite, you know, Levy, etc. But we're going to keep going for now. Okay, that's Prospector. Chaperone. Chaperone has never been on this spreadsheet, so I cannot speak on its buff or anything like that. It's newly added, and it has slightly higher DPS than Whisper, with similar total to a Trench Lightweight. So it's actually not bad, right? Let's go to Chaperone here. The big change with Chaperone is that you can now proc Roadborne without getting a kill. It's just 2 crits, which makes it really easy to use for boss damage. The only problem with Chaperone is that it has like a really long reload time, so you kind of have to use Radiant Dance Machines or something like Rain of Fire in order to use this thing effectively. If you do though, however, with that increased rate of fire from the Roadborne, this thing's DPS is actually pretty good for a special weapon, right? Like 190k, nothing to scoff about, right? That's higher than Whisper, even though the total damage is not super great or anything, nothing special to write home about. If you compare this to something like Cloud Strike, which actually, let's go to Cloud Strike just as an example. Cloud Strike has something like 4.6 million total damage, right? At being, you know, 167k DPS, which is a little bit lower. But if you go to something like Chaperone, you'll see over here 2.5, so significantly less. I don't know, this thing could find a niche. I think they did buff it into maybe some usability levels, but again, not that great. I mean, you're looking at stuff like Lord of Wolves in this territory. Yeah, really not that great, but it is really easy to use. I'll give it that, and the range is not too bad. Anyways, Chaperone, I'm not going to recommend it for day one, obviously, but, you know, just if you were looking for the information on Chaperone, here it is. Two-Tailed Fox. You can no longer one-shot ignite with Two-Tailed Fox, even if you have Ember of Ashes. So I did test with Ember of Ashes and without. I believe it's still a 2-shot ignite even without Ember of Ashes, so I guess it's not really a difference if you use it or not. But yeah, Two-Tailed Fox, it got approximately a 5.5% nerf. I really expected the ignition damage to be more of a problem than this, right? Because you're literally getting half the ignitions, right? So I thought it would be more than a 5.5% nerf, but apparently it is a 5.5% nerf. That is how much it got nerfed. And again, no more per-shot ignition. Two-Tailed Fox was already dog shit. I was already not a fan of this weapon. Total damage 3.2 is absolutely pathetic, and DPS is like pathetic too. I mean, look at this thing. You're literally the same DPS as like nerfed Lament. You know, it's like the same DPS as like Still Hunt with Rain of Fire, which is a special weapon. I don't know. It's just horrible. It's just horrible, right? Really awful stuff. Not much to talk about. Next up, Peacekeepers. So Peacekeepers, I haven't even included on this list. I tested every iteration that the chat wanted me to test with Peacekeepers, whether we're talking Teraba, no Teraba, so like 2 legendaries, whether we're talking Osteo, whether we're talking swapping with Anarchy. I tested everything, and it's worse than Outbreak, no matter what you try to do. The Teraba thing, people were like theory crafting on Reddit yesterday that like you could keep up the 20 stacks if you have like 3 loaders and Lunafactions, because technically speaking, like you can reload SMGs in like 0.967 seconds or something, and Peacekeeper stays up for like 1 second. This is just not true, by the way. I tried to like reload, and it's like RNG whether or not you keep the 20 stacks or not, and even if you do keep the 20 stacks, it's still just not worth using in my opinion. So I think the best way to use this thing, if you really wanted to use it, is either with like like 2 legendary SMGs with like target lock and like 4 times or something, or like Vorpal, or you can use it with like Osteo and like an energy SMG. Even if you do that though, the only thing this thing is really good for is it builds your Transcendence really quickly, and it builds your Super fairly quickly as well, because it's a primary hit with like really high fire rate. But besides that, it's just really not worth using in my opinion. Outbreak is better. Outbreak also builds Transcendence really fast and Super really fast, which was demonstrated last season when I did like the rotation testing. If you guys were watching stream, Outbreak showed some pretty impressive results there. Honestly, like I'm not gonna lie to you guys, if you want like a really safe option for like day 1 type damage, honestly having like 6 Outbreaks is not that bad, because you get like a lot of supers, and it's like it's like super safe. It's like super safe, super brain dead, super easy to use. You don't need like anything. You can hit body shots. It's like, it's, you know what I mean? So like Outbreak was actually a pretty impressive showing. I think Outbreak probably toes the line of being like just good enough for contest, but like just not bad enough that like you're gonna like cause wipes or anything like that. So I don't know, Outbreak's interesting, but if you want like primary ammo only damage, I think Outbreak is better. And obviously if you want to use Peacekeepers optimally with the Stowed effect, you need to use 2 primaries. Outbreak, you only need to use 1. Okay, enough yap. Aggressive swords with Pack Hunter. According to my calculations, like, you know, it was going to get around this buff, and it did. 13% heavy buff, 12% light buff. Somewhere in the middle if you combine them for a combo. Aggressive swords now have the highest total damage in the game with Relentless Strike, so pretty cool. Even higher than Gold Tusk. Their 1 heavy 2 light surrounded has similar DPS to like double perk Guillotine or light attack bequest. So let me go ahead and filter by swords in my spreadsheet here so you guys know what I'm talking about. Let's go to aggressive sword. Okay, there you go. Boom. So aggressive swords 179k 822. That is going to be, oh, I haven't sorted these properly, sorry. Yeah, that's going to be somewhere around like frenzy, bait and switch, you know, falling guillotine, which is light attacks. It's somewhere around like relentless whirlwind. Yeah, okay, so it's not that great, right? You can see here that with a superior perk, which is enhanced surrounded, it is still just around the same DPS as an adaptive sword, right? And the adaptive sword, I mean, it's mostly because like this aggressive sword doesn't have relentless, but you know, it's, ignore the total damage. It would be higher if it had relentless, but you know, just the damage numbers itself, it's like not that much higher than something like an adaptive sword, even with a worse damage perk. So, you know, not amazing or anything, but for total damage, really excellent, obviously. So hopefully we get like a relentless whirlwind or like relentless chaos reshaped aggressive or something like that. That'd be cool. It wouldn't be game breaking. I think it's balanced. Okay. That is that. Oh yeah, one more thing. The light attack only version. So let's say you have like a relentless whirlwind crown splitter. It's very similar to Gold Tusk, right? The DPS is very similar. The total damage is slightly higher. It's basically like a Gold Tusk. You can think about it like that. It's like a Titan Gold Tusk. Okay, we're done with weapons. You know, nothing like super meta warping, to be honest with you, right? With some unnecessary nerf like Two-Tailed Fox and stuff like that, but Prospector is cool, right? It's a cool burst option, super brain dead, super easy to use on non-contest because, you know, total damage is not an issue, but in contest when there is a total damage issue, I don't think it's that good in my honest opinion. Okay, Lucky Pants, Lucky Pantalones. There are 5 hand cannons that I tested here: Ariana's Malfeasance, The Last Word, Warden's Law, and Sightline Survey. So there were some primary buffs that disproportionately affected heavy burst hand cannons. So the 180 RPMs got hit particularly hard here, and the 225s didn't get hit at all. So the 225 RPM like heavy burst hand cannon buffs actually offset the Lucky Pants nerf. So Warden's Law actually ends up being like almost unchanged. It's like a 0%, it's like 0.0 something percent buff or something like that. It's actually like a small buff. So Warden's Law didn't get changed. Sightline Survey 13% nerf. Malfeasance also 13% nerf. They're both 180 RPM, so it makes sense. Whether you're blighted or not, it's still around 12 to 13%. So, you know, unfortunate. Last Word. Okay, I'm assuming this is the reason why Last Word was 2-tapping in PvP yesterday. It doesn't really have anything to do with Lucky Pants, I think. It just randomly has like a 32% buff for some reason. I'm going to assume this is going to be walked back because this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to assume that like the heavy burst hand cannon buff also applied to Last Word or something for some reason. So I don't take that with a grain of salt. I'm not sure if that's the actual cause, but yeah, Last Word is now the best Lucky Pants hand cannon in the game by a, you know, sizable margin because it just randomly got a 32%. I'm just going to assume that this is going to be walked back. Okay, I'm going to assume it's going to be walked back. And this is with 2 mags, by the way. So you pull out Last Word, you shoot, and you reload with a marksman's dodge, and then you shoot, and then you're done, right? So that's Last Word. Okay, Ariana's Vow also was unchanged. I am not sure why, but it was not changed. Yeah, like the amount of damage that like 9 shots does, like a full mag does no change. Last time I experienced rather consistent boss health bar chunking when I used Ariana's Vow. This time not. I don't know if that's like I don't know if they changed something in the background or something for that to happen, but I was not able to get chunking out of Ariana's Vow this season. Okay, so the conclusion. What's the conclusion for Lucky Pants, right? The summary. Number 1, I think Malfeasance is now practically irrelevant for Lucky Pants if you are not in a taken activity. So I'm thinking stuff like Corrupted GM, or like if you're doing maybe Last Wish or Shattered Throne. With Lucky Pants specifically, you know, yeah. And even if an enemy is taken, it's only 6% ahead of Warden's Law. So you can argue that that's not really worth your exotic slot. Just use Warden's Law, right? 180s in general are now awful for Lucky Pants. So if you're using Sightline Survey, it's even worse now. Last Word unintentionally buffed. And also one more thing. So people were asking me to test this thing where you start with Warden's Law into Ariana's Vow. And the reason for this is, let me just explain if you guys are not aware. They changed Lucky Pants so that if you don't get 7 stacks of a buff, if you only get 6 and you swap off a weapon, it doesn't incur the out of luck cooldown. So what you can do is you can use Warden's Law for 3 bursts, which give you ×6, right? And then you can switch to the highest damage profile hand cannon in the game, which is of course Ariana's Vow. And because Ariana's Vow, its main downside is that it can't stack very quickly because its fire rate's really low, but its per damage shot is really high. You can use another hand cannon to get up to 6, switch to this hand cannon, and then you immediately have 7 the first shot, right? So then you swap, and then you can shoot 7 shots here before you run out of the buff, right? So I stop here, right? So you might be wondering, what's the DPS of that compared to swapping to like Ariana's Vow and dumping a full mag? Well, I've done the math for you. Let's go ahead and take a look. So it's clear here, go to LP, and you can see here that Ariana's Vow, with primed with 3 heavy burst hand cannon shots, 7 shots, illegally modded holster, it's actually higher than Last Word, right? So the problem with this, right? So you might be rushing to the conclusion here, be like, whoa, this is really good, right? The problem with this is that you're giving up your kinetic slot and you're still incurring the out of luck cooldown. Now, the thing about the out of luck cooldown and Lucky Pants rotations in general is that the reason you even used out of luck to begin with, or sorry, the reason you use Lucky Pants to begin with just one weapon is so that the other 2 weapons can fill the 10 seconds of your out of luck cooldown. So that's really annoying because now you have to fill 10 seconds of DPS time with just your heavy weapon and abilities, which is way harder to do than using all your kinetic weapon and your heavy weapon and your abilities, right? So kind of annoying, I think. And then Warden's Law is basically useless during this 10-second cooldown as well, by the way. So really annoying. And then you have to somehow figure out how to like reload Warden's Law as well. So I don't know, just really annoying. In my opinion, if I'm going to experiment with Lucky Pants rotations this season, if they don't walk back the Last Word nerf, I'll probably look into that. Or I'm going to look into shooting only 6 Ariana shots. I haven't calculated the swap DPS of that because it just, didn't occur to me at the time. But I will do that at some point, and we'll see if the DPS is good. I'm not really hopeful though, because those last 2 shots or the last 3 shots are really the most important. And this DPS value is already not that high. Like 191k, that's like, not significantly better than something like Whisper, right? So in my opinion, Lucky Pants, I don't know, not great. Not super great, even though like stuff didn't change that much. For example, something like Warden's Law, I don't know. The thing is, like, Prismatic and super power creep have kind of just made Lucky Pants a little bit worse, because you need support from stuff like Whisper of Impetus for Warden's Law to be good. And because Stasis Hunter, for example, doesn't have really support for debuff or buff, it's kind of like awkward to use Stasis Hunter. And of course, the neutral kit's nowhere near as good as Prismatic, right? So Lucky Pants in general is just kind of unlucky in the sandbox right now. Even if a lot of the popular options haven't been changed, like Ariana's Vow and Warden's Law, I think like the priming thing isn't really worth talking about, to be honest with you. So it's just, I don't know, Lucky Pants is just in a really weird situation right now. But I'm happy to announce that, unless this is unintended, Warden's Law and Ariana's Vow damage has been unchanged. So those are like the good ones anyway. So those of you who were like worried that this was going to be a nerf to these weapons, it's not. So you can still use it in like GMs and stuff. It's pretty much the same. Okay. My friend SpiderReviver, he did some testing for reserve stuff, because Bungie said that like rocket sidearms, glaives, snipers, levy, traces, all of these things are going to get reserve buffs because they missed them on their previous pass. I'm just going to briefly talk about them. This is not damage related. Some of it is, but most of it isn't. But I do want to talk about it because he has some important findings that I want to present to you. So credit to him. Number 1. Rocket sidearms on average have a 28% total nerf, which is bigger than 28.5, which is what Bungie said, which means basically with max reserves, you go from 76 ammo to 55. So I think with full reserves, you get something like, I don't know, like 35, 40 ammo or something like that. It's pretty rough. You get like 3 mags, basically 3.5 mags. Yeah, a bit rough. Definitely going to take some getting used to, but I think it was, it's kind of deserved. And rocket sidearms still feel usable as long as you are ammo conscious and you're not just like willy-nilly spraying your ammo everywhere and not making finishers. Okay, Leviathan's Breath actually got a 20% total buff. So I believe it got 15 ammo with no reserve mods and 15 ammo with max reserve mods previously. The way that it works now is that I believe you get 16 ammo with 0 reserves and you get 18 with 1 reserve, and then after that it's all 18, right? So 18, 15, 18, 20% total buff, pretty good. Similar total damage to Cloud Strike with higher DPS. So let's go ahead and look at Levy here. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong tab. This is the swap tab, and my bad. Let's go ahead and look at Levy. Levy, boom, other 18 shots. You can see here 4.6 total damage, and of course 207k. If you want to use Prospector, I would say use Levy. Levy is more applicable to more bosses, right? It doesn't require that cluster bomb to like hit a boss with like a circular hitbox or a large hitbox. You can use it on pretty much any boss size. It's super easy to use. You don't really need Radiant Dance Machines to use it optimally. It has higher total damage. I don't know, Levy is pretty good. This damage, and the nice thing, by the way, is this is with 3 reserve mods, by the way. This is with 3 reserve mods. Levy, you can run 1 reserve mod and 2 resists, which is really nice in the current sandbox. So as long as you're willing to run resists, this thing has pretty good total damage. But yeah, I'm not going to say like this is like my #1 recommendation. I still think like stuff like Parasite and other weapons are maybe like a little bit better, but so we're talking about, I suppose. Okay, next we have Traces. Traces got an average 10% total buff. No one's using Trace Rifles for Frost DPS, but I thought I'd mention it, I suppose. And then snipers are mostly unchanged from last season. Bungie said they didn't touch snipers by accident. They actually did touch snipers in the middle of last season, just kind of like randomly. So Cloud Strike is unchanged, Whisper is unchanged, Darcy is unchanged. Most legendary snipers are unchanged. Some of like the rapid fire snipers and adaptive snipers and aggressive snipers, like the legendaries, they're off by like 1 or 2, but I didn't really touch them because it's almost no difference, right? So if you saw the sniper values that I updated in my spreadsheet last season, that's what they are this season. So yeah, Izzy's the same, Cloud Strike's the same, you know, all the important snipers are basically the same. Okay, supers. This is some big stuff. This is some big stuff here. Okay, we got a lot to talk about for supers. So I'm not sure what Bungie's numbers were for some of these. I'm just gonna say what I tested them to be. Pyrogale Burning Maul, 4% buff, but Pyrogale tends to do like slightly randomly higher or lower damage sometimes. So I tested this on Riven. I mean, I could show you the testing footage real quick. I tested this on Riven, but yeah, like the damage is sometimes a bit random with Pyrogale. So I just like boom, slammed her in the toes. Obviously, you know, you get the Cyclone blowing her up underneath her. Yeah, most people agree Riven is like the best boss to test this on. I don't know. With Roaring Flames, this thing, it was still not that good. It's like, you know, 615k. Not that great. I don't think it's a meta super. Certainly not. And the reason is, well, I'll show you in a second here. Celestial Nighthawk did get a 5% nerf, but it still chunks around 9%, which means it's still pretty decent, right? It's still like the best burst damage super in the game, given how easy it is to pre-pop, etc. You can go to the swap tab here. Actually, why don't we go to the swap tab and I'll filter by supers so we can have some nice background data to look at. Yeah, Golden Gun Marksman, still top 2 slots, right? I mean, no surprises there, no surprises. Okay, actually, we should go to swap DPS. That's probably more realistic. Yeah, there you go. 2 of the top 5 slots. Okay, this is the big one. This is the big one. Guys, I got some news. So Bungie accidentally, I think, unless this is intentional, I'm not aware if it's intentional, but they gave Thundercrash a 93% buff to base damage. You don't believe me? Oh, let me show you. Let me show you. Okay, so Celestial Nighthawk, reminder, Celestial Nighthawk, how much damage does it do, right? So we go to Golden Gun Celestial Nighthawk, it does 574k with the chunking. See, it's like 600k, right? Let's go to Thundercrash. Thundercrash base damage. Thundercrash base damage. How much does it do? 545,000. 545,000. This is with no Cuirass, no cess. No Cuirass, no cess. Look at the health bar. Look at the health bar. It's accurate. It's accurate. Look. It's like 578 minus the relic damage. That's 545. Right? Crazy. Crazy. And then the buff to Cuirass, just overall buff compared to last season, 45%, 70% buff to cess. What does this mean overall? What does this mean overall? Good question. Thundercrash with Cuirass and Cess does essentially the same damage, right? So it's kind of your choice. If you, the way I see it is like, if you want to use Galanor, then you have to use Cess, right? If you want to just use Cuirass and not have to do any prep whatsoever, you can use Thundercrash. Now, what is the big thing here? What is the big thing here? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Cuirass of the Falling Star Thundercrash now does more damage than Feast of Light Nova Bomb. You heard it here first. Cuirass of the Falling Star Thundercrash now does more damage than Nova Bomb, right? So pretty insane. I mean, you can see it here. It's 818 versus 711. I can just show you that real quick if you don't believe me. But yeah, Cuirass Thundercrash, I'm popping in here. You can see it. Boom. Yeah, I mean, that number's just chunking up hella high just instantly, right? It's 845 minus relic damage, 818k. We go to our Nova Bomb here. Something to note, by the way, I tested Nova Bomb like 6 or 7 times. It seems like the missiles are very prone to instantly exploding on a target now instead of like exploding outward and seeking back in. I even tested from like 30 meters away or something and it still happened. So if you see like no missiles on a target on Nova Bomb, just assume that they like instantly detonated. Like you can see here, they just kind of like instantly blow up on him. Like you see that, right? So I don't know if this is a fix that was targeting the thing that Chicken found, where like if you Nova Bomb really close, it just doesn't make the missiles and like you do less damage. Now it makes the missiles, but it instantly blows up on the target. So yeah, you can see here 740 minus relic damage is 711k. So this is insane. This is absolutely insane. Titans really have no reason to use Twilight Arsenal now, especially that it's being gutted by 25%, right? Twilight Arsenal was like already on the edge of like not being viable, and now they've nerfed it by 25%. Which is like stupid in my opinion. But yeah, stupid, nerfed it by 25%. They give it 23% buff to the axes, but I don't think anyone cares. Those axes were doing very little damage to begin with. They were just kind of weakened utility tools. They're fun to like skate with, but you know, whatever. So anyways, yeah. T-Crash is meta. Woo! T-Crash is meta. Yeah, T-Crash is like top 3 damage supers in the game now, right? You have Goldie, which is like only pre-pop is good. You have Nova Bomb, which is like you need to run Feast of Light. And then you have T-Crash. Giga Chad T-Crash, right? You don't need to do anything with T-Crash. You can just run Cuirass, right? And Cuirass has neutral effects now too, obviously, which are positive. But even if you ignore those neutral effects, you just slap this bad boy on for damage. Boom! You do more damage than a Nova, right? So pretty crazy. Yeah, not much to talk about. This thing is stackable. It doesn't block shots. I don't know. Thundercrash is great now. I mean, I low-key hope they leave things like this, because I don't know, like if you're a Titan on day one, like consider taking T-Crash. Obviously your faceted purpose is worse now, and you know, Void Overshield from with the buff and like faceted purpose is probably more useful like defensive wise. But if you're willing to take amplified from orbs or just not run faceted purpose, T-Crash is, you know, OP. Look at this shit. Hello? Look at this shit. It has higher swap DPS than Gathering Storm, which is a tick super, by the way. So I don't know, pretty crazy stuff. That's all I'm gonna say. Pretty crazy stuff. I honestly hope they keep T-Crash like this, but you know, I don't think they will, because a 93% buff to a super I don't think has ever happened. So I think it's unintentional. Okay, anyways, Twilight Arsenal we already talked about. Nova Bomb, 12% nerf to SAS, not that big. A Nova Warp, 22% buff. Yay? Question mark. Okay, Winter's Wrath. Apparently, shatter damage in general this season is bugged. So take this with a grain of salt, just like last word. I'm assuming this is gonna be fixed. It got a 16% nerf. So they said they buffed the interaction of like Balladors with like allied freeze or something. But yeah, there's like a 16% nerf to the actual damage of the super for some reason. I'm assuming it's gonna be patched though, because like a lot of people are saying like shadow damage is bugged and stuff. I don't know. There's so many. This is, in my opinion, at least while I've been playing, the most values that are just wrong compared to like what Bungie said they would do. There's a lot of stuff that's broken this season, a lot of values that are completely like incorrect. Some stuff that I haven't even covered. If just go through the Destiny Reddit, they're like all talking about a bunch of different numbers that are just wrong. Like 1-2 punch isn't working properly. There's like melee damage numbers that are wrong. There's a bunch of stuff. Okay. Anyways, conclusion. Cuirass T-Crash note a similar swap DPS to SAS Nova, which needs 6 orbs by the way, and blocks shots. Goldie still peak swap DPS. Twilight Arsenal gutted. Yeah, okay, that's basically it. In my opinion, if you want weaken, just run Cuirass T-Crash and win a Withering Gaze Sniper. Speaking of which, I'm going to talk about that in a second. Okay, we're reaching the end of this gravy train here. Melees, the stylish interaction math-wise got a 43% nerf if we're talking about stylish grapples, which if you're curious, you can see it over here. Yeah, there you go. Stylish Executioner, biotic enhancements. I believe, did I fix this? Yeah, I did. It's 1.5. Yeah, I fixed it. So yeah, if we go to like true DPS here, you can see stylish with biotic is significantly lower. So if you want to do max grapple like single shot DPS, you can do Verity, I guess, instead, because Verity's interaction didn't get nerfed. But that's up to you, right? It's you know, I don't think most people are going to use Verity. So, but yeah, that is an option if you want to use it. Grapple melee. Okay, some people were saying to me last season, they were yapping and being like, hey guys, Titan is getting a 5% melee damage bonus, and base melee affects grapple melee damage. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I don't know who was spreading this misinformation. I tested it this season. There is no difference in damage between Warlock grapple melee and Titan grapple melee. Additionally, some people were spreading this misinformation that grapple melee got nerfed compared to last season. It did not get nerfed. It is probably the 1-2 punch interaction that I believe Titan Skate has posted on the Bungie forums that is currently bugged on bosses. Grapple melee itself did not get nerfed whatsoever, and the difference between Warlock and Titan grapple melee is non-existent. They do the exact same damage. And finally, the Titan melee does indeed do a 5%, like the base melee, just the regular punch, does 5% more than the other classes. I'm not sure how this interacts with other powered melees that are not grappled melee. I assume it doesn't affect them unless you're talking about just like knockout punches and like roaring flames punches, but I'm not talking about like throwing hammer and stuff. Okay, so that's melees. That's basically it. That is basically it. That's the data. Okay, I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully you guys are cool with that. I mean, usually that's how my videos go. But anyways, what's my thoughts on the damage meta in general? Okay, so number one, let's talk about artifact mods. Artifact mods this season, in my opinion, I know this maybe it's controversial. I don't think it's that controversial. I don't think any of them are super significant, to be honest with you, right? Most of them are stasis based. Stasis isn't super meta for like day one stuff. I mean, you can use it if you want, but I don't think it's that meta for day one stuff. Concussive reload, it's super easy to apply weaken. Apparently the weaken is like 20 seconds though, which is really, really long. So, I mean, this is certainly a mod that you probably want to take into a day one now, because I mean, this is really easy to apply. I would not rely on the reload though, because apparently the reload effect is gated to the weaken. And if a weaken is currently on a boss, you can't reproc it. So I would probably not use this for damage rotations, but the weaken being this long is pretty nice. So it's kind of like a buffed and also nerfed version of weaken clear from previous seasons. So pretty cool stuff. The other stuff here is not that great though, right? Like conductive cosmic crystals, arc abilities, I suppose this is kind of nice for like T-Crash, void abilities, nice for SAS Nova, and Dark Ether Reaper weapons. Unfortunately, none of the Dark Ether Reaper weapons are super relevant for like a day one instance. I know a lot of people are grinding for stuff like Bittersweet, for example, but Bittersweet does not have the total damage to compete in like a day one contest level damage requirement. I could be wrong about this. Maybe the bosses fall over like paper, or maybe you have really good ammo economy and maybe I'm wrong, but just looking at the flat out numbers, generally speaking, legendary heavy GLs are not viable in day one circumstances because they just don't have enough like total damage, in my opinion at least, and they're kind of annoying to use. But you know, Envious Arsenal makes it so that you don't really need to run like reload dodges or anything, or Radiant Dance Machines or Rain of Fire or whatever. So that's kind of up to you. I mean, 10% is pretty nice, I suppose, but even with 10%, it's not the same total damage as something like a Whisper or something like a Parasite, or you know, a Microcosm even. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. That's all I'm gonna say. This is kind of whatever, right? You already have a concussive reload, a kinetic impacts. This seems like it's okay, but if it's anything like kinetic tremors, I don't think the damage is going to be enough to really push legendary heavy jails up there. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe like Parasite will be decent with this or something like that, or like Prospector. This just hasn't had enough testing for me to really know for sure. The single shockwave is kind of nice because it sounds like you're going to be reprocking it more often than not, but I don't know. I still think it's not that great. I think that maybe the multiple hits from the like little explosives, the clusters from Prospector will maybe trigger this more rapidly. That would be pretty cool to see. However, I don't think, I don't know. I don't think they're trying to make a jail meta here, but like, I don't think it necessarily completely shifts stuff like Whisper out of the meta. And then obviously this is kind of just whatever. So artifact mods, I think, don't play necessarily a huge role. I think the concussive reload free weaken is really nice in 3-man situations, which means that you don't need to run like a tractor or tether necessarily, and you can kind of just run whatever. In terms of damage stuff though, like builds we already talked about, you can kind of just run the usual. But in terms of damage stuff, here's what I think is probably going to be good. If you... Okay, so for those of you that have seen the trailer, it looks like we're going to be in like a DSC-like environment, so we're probably going to get fallen bosses. Fallen bosses are like, you know, captains, servitors, etc. The only really like precision consistent boss that comes from like DSC style bosses is probably like a servitor. And so if you get a servitor, I think Whisper is going to be great. Whisper is still fine, super consistent, ammo efficient, etc, etc. You can use Prospector if a boss has not that much health. I think Parasite holster swapping is really good. One thing to note, you know, I'm probably gonna make a YouTube short about it. You know, forget about what I said. Sorry. I'm probably gonna make a YouTube short about Sanguine Alchemy because I think it's like an entirely separate thing that deserves its own shout. So besides that, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. I think you can do Parasite holster swapping, which for those of you that are not aware, there's like videos on Chicken SI2's channel. Parasite holster swapping is like super easy to do in even like a day one scenario. It's literally you shoot Parasite and then shoot another weapon for like 3 seconds and then shoot Parasite and then shoot another. It's like super easy. So you could do Parasite, you could do Whisper, you could do Microcosm. You could honestly probably run 3 outbreaks. I'm not even kidding, unless the damage is super tight. I mean, Prospector is like maybe usable, like I said. Acaris is okay. Levy's probably a decent consistent option as well. Me personally, I'm probably going to be bringing Parasite into the day one because, you know, it's really ammo efficient. It's got great ammo economy for pickups. It can nuke mini bosses if you need to in a pinch. It's got good interactions with reserves. It has crazy high reserves even without reserve mods, which is good with resist on day one. Super easy to use for damage. I don't know. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't really have anything else to say. Damage rotation wise, I will probably be designing damage rotations over the next couple days after the day one. This is all I have to say for Vesper's host prep though, and I will make that YouTube short so you guys can see what I'm talking about with Sanguine. A lot of people have been asking me what this weird loadout swap thing I'm doing for day one is. I'm going to show you what it is and try to like give you an example of why I think it's strong. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Good luck on your day one experiences. Let me know if I trolled you with my advice, or let me know if my advice was baller. I mean, my advice is pretty like safe this time around. I don't know, it's nothing too controversial. So yeah, good luck and have fun.